Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Nature is a huge source of inspiration, and in this week's video I'm going to be working in the app Procreate on the iPad, and I'm going to create an illustration of a character in a nature setting. In fact, I'll be using photos from this very spot where I'm sitting to bring reality, the world, and imagination, a fantasy, a character together. And I hope you enjoy it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video.
The morning was off to a glorious start with a beautiful sunrise. It was a little bit hazy, and you know how that distorts the light, and in just the most beautiful way, the reflection on the water, it was just golden. And because I derive so much inspiration and energy from the trees themselves, I thought it would be really fun to bring my iPad and work on something here. It feels really good to change it up and just leave the house. And as you know, I love to take field trips and see what comes from my travels. And you don't have to go very far. You don't have to go abroad to find inspiration. This park is just blocks from my house, and it generously gave me an idea right away. This is a project that's perfect for beginners in the app Procreate for the iPad. So hit the plus sign in the upper right hand corner and add a canvas. I selected a square that's 10 by 10. Hit the wrench in the upper left corner and insert your background photo. So you can pick a photo from Pexels, some online photo repository, or you can take one yourself the way I have here. And the reason I chose this one is because the shape of the tree is very interesting and it's perfect for the idea that I have. I also have a little bit of ground down below for my character to stand on. Because my character is going to be comprised of very simple shapes, I'm going to be using the studio pen in the brush library. Right now I'm selecting her skin color, and because of the background, I want it to really stand out, so I could go with something either very light or very dark. And I think I'm going to go for something lighter, since the idea for the tree is also going to be lighter. So in this way too, I think you'll be able to see it a little bit clearer. So I'm just starting with an oval, and you can see here that I'm filling it in by dragging and dropping the color, as well as using my pen to just clean up any little spots that it didn't take. And now I'll be adding her neck, which is again just a simple shape, and closing that up, and then I'll be dragging in that color as well. I'm adding a new layer, and I'm going to use a fluorescent green just so that you can see really clearly. This will not matter as this illustration progresses, but I just want to show you just how simple my shape is going to be for her body. Okay, and then in order to drag color and fill a color, you have to have a closed shape. So just remember, if there are any gaps, they have to be closed. On a new layer, I'm now selecting a color from the background, that rusty, orangey, darker red, and it's on a new layer, and now I'm going to be working on her hair. And I'm going to make her hair kind of thick because I'd like to put a few elements inside of that shape. On a new layer, I'm going to make a little teacup for her, and on another new layer, I'm going to pick a color that is tea colored, and I'm going to create a little illusion like her teacup is full of tea. And then on the cup layer, I'm just going to add that little edge so that way it looks like the liquid is inside. I'll move a little bit slower so you can see just how I create the hands. I'm imagining that her hand is going to be just coming out of a long sleeve, so I don't have to actually make the shape of her arm. I'm just going to create her little hand. And I'm not going to complicate it by having her finger inside of the handle of the cup. She's holding a teacup like she's keeping her hands warm. On a new layer, I'm going to create her sleeve now, and I'm using a bright color so you can see it. And again, these are just the working colors. Instead of redrawing something that might need a size correction, I like to just use the tools that Procreate gives me in order to manipulate the size. So I'm on 2 layers. I selected the sleeve and her hand, and I'm using the move tool, the little arrow in the upper left corner, and the freehand tool, you can see that's down below, to create a selection, and now I can move and adjust that arm. So I'm extending it a little bit longer, and I moved it forward just a little bit. Just like with all her other parts, I'm also making sure her facial features are all on their own layers. So right now I'm creating a big white of her eye, and now I'm adding a new layer, and you'll see here I'm selecting black, and I've added a new layer. Now on that new layer, if you touch it, you can hit clipping mask. And then what I can do is I can color in the black of her eye without worrying about going outside the lines. So it really makes it easy to stay inside the shape. For her nose, I'm selecting the skin color of her face, and her nose is going on its own layer. And now I'm going to select 2 shades for her lips. Her upper lip is going to be darker than her lower lip. And I do this so that it just adds a little bit more interest. When I zoomed out, I thought her mouth looked a little small, so now I'm just adding a little bit more to each of those layers. I've gone ahead and made her shoe, and now on another layer underneath her shoe, I'm going to select her skin color from her face and just fill in a rounded shape, and that way I have those 2 things on 2 layers. So I can always change my mind about the colors of these things. And now I'm going to select both. I'm going to duplicate each of those layers, the shoe and her foot color, and I'm going to select one of the shoes and the corresponding foot, and I'm just duplicating. So that way now I have 2 feet. So before I go on, I have to share the magic that happened that morning. You can see there's a little owl. Actually, he's quite big, and he was so quiet. I barely felt his presence and looked up, and there he was right above me just staring, and he stared for a good long while. And interestingly, when I was sitting and drawing at my table, a woman came by and asked me if I'd seen an owl, which I thought was quite a serendipity. And so I learned that this is the barred owl, B-A-R-R-E-D, and they nest in the cavities of trees. And since I was having a very introspective morning, as I mostly do on these walks, I decided that the owl had to make it into my illustration. So here I am on a new layer, and I'm just creating a simple owl shape. And you can see here that I'm creating him sort of at a 3/4 angle, and I'll make sure that I give him claws that he's holding on to the tree. I'm moving quickly through the owl, but I just want to share that all of the different elements, so these darker brown feathers and then these lighter gray feathers, so they're each on their own layers. So the brown ones are together on one layer, and then the light gray ones are together on their own layer. And then I just created one claw and duplicated the layer so that it looks like, one is sort of above the other. And here at the end, I'm going to add another set of feathers that are just a slightly different color, and they too are on their own layer. Now I'm home, and I'm adding a photo by hitting the wrench in the upper left-hand corner, and now I'm adding the photo that I want to use for the body of my figure. And here you can see that the layer just came in, so I'm moving it so it's just above that fluorescent green body shape. And now I'm going to just touch that layer, and that menu comes up, and I hit clipping mask. And now I can use the move tool to position these leaves how I like them. Now I know that there isn't a lot of contrast between her body and the background, so we're gonna be fine-tuning this but I just want to show you how cool you essentially can put any photograph inside a shape, and if you hit clipping mask, it stays within the confines of that shape. So you can move it around as I'm doing and figure out, the best place, the best positioning. Okay, so now I'm going to adjust the color of these leaves. So I'm on that layer, and you can see here that I'm using the menu below to adjust the hue. You can adjust the colors, you can adjust the saturation and the brightness. And I don't want to change too much right now, because actually what I want to do is change the background. So I'm going to go ahead and change the saturation and brightness of my background. So I'm on the background layer, and here you can see that I can also play with the hue a little bit, and this is what's fun about being creative and being an artist, that we can change the colors of the real world and turn them into more of what we like to see. So here you can see I'm pushing it a little bit so that we have more of an orangey pink happening, and I just love that glow. And for her sleeve, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the adjustment layer menu. So I'm on the sleeve layer. You can see that I'm changing the way it looks by just scrolling through the different options. And I'm just sort of playing here and seeing, like, is there a particular adjustment layer that I can use here that will complement her body? And so what I've decided is I'm going to darken her sleeve, and I'm going through the menu again to see if there isn't one that feels like it could work. And this is one that I kind of like the look of, but I'm going to drop the opacity so that it's not so harsh, so we can still see some of the leaves coming through, and there's just enough difference with the color that we can tell that the sleeve is different than her body. Now I have to address her hand, so what I will do now is I'm going to drop the opacity of her hand. I'll use the selection tool in the upper left-hand corner to carefully take that part of her hand that I don't need. I'll swipe 3 fingers, and then I'll hit cut when the menu comes up, and then that just disappears. So now I'm going to make a selection, again using the selection tool. I'm on the background layer, and I'm just creating a wavy shape, like kind of a blob shape, and I'm going to hit cut and paste. And here what's happening is I'm adjusting the colors on that part of the background that I've just sort of cut and paste. It's on its own layer. And you can see here that I'm adjusting the hue so that it just gets a little bit greener than it was just a little bit ago, because I lost a lot of the green when I changed the trees to a more orangey pink. And so here you can see that I'm bringing that green back. And I'm trying to just be careful so it doesn't look really obvious, so it feels like it's blending in well, and I think it is. I'm going to move quickly through the details. I'm just adding some leaves to her hair, and you can see here that these two, I'm putting them each on their own layer, and I'm using the background colors to decide what color those leaves will be. Now I'm giving them some more details, and all of these details are on their own layer as well. And this is the part that, really can take a very long time, making all the minor adjustments, deciding, what color all the little details are going to be, fine-tuning, cleaning up. So I'm not going to spend time going through it, because I feel like you've learned how to create this style of illustration. So make your art your own, have a great time with it. I would love to see what you create, so please tag me at Creator Alma on Instagram if you'd like to share your art with everyone. I'd love to see what you create. Here you can see I'm also fine-tuning her skin color and giving the owl just some details. I'm trying to figure out, okay, what can I do to make this owl even more of a standout? I've been playing a lot with light, and if you're interested in taking a class with me in Skillshare, I actually teach a course which I'll show you here, which brings a lot of these luminous touches to the artwork. So if that interests you, please click in the description below. So here I'm just adding a little bit of glow around the owl and having some light come through the trees just to give it a little bit of sparkle. Now I'm just giving her a little bit of color on her cheeks, and I'm using a little bit of a texture brush just to give her hair some highlights. And as a final touch, I'm outlining her silhouette just so that she stands out a little bit more against the background. Thank you so much for your attention. If you like this video, thank you for giving it a thumbs up. And if you do subscribe to my channel, I'm really grateful that you do. Thanks everyone. Have a good week.